My study shows it compares three groups of children when they become adults. And the only difference is, in principle, if they grew up in an intact family or separated parents, or let's say alienation. I call that intentional and justified severance, cutting of parental bonds. The sense of my study was to provide some kind of feedback about decisions, or how to orientate decisions. And the result is, whenever you cut the bonds of a child, you harm the child. Whenever there is a contribution for a conflict to escalate, to rise, you harm the child. Whenever you involve the child in a parental conflict, you harm the child. Many results are interesting because I could make not only correlations but causal relationships. So how much the less, that's what I said to you, the more conflict, the poorer the health, the worse the life satisfaction. But there were two effects I didn't expect. One of them is the intergenerational, even at the third group. So the alienation group, that parents were alienated as children and alienated also as parents. I don't know, that's over proportional. According to my study, it is significant. This study's the importance is significant, but the message is you have to break the circle, because everything you experience in your childhood will bring it. You will bring it to the next generation. It's worth to work on it, to cut it now. If you are alienated as a child and you alienate as a father or a mother, it is somehow logical because that's what you saw at home. But in this case, both roles are passive. So you are alienated as a child and you are alienated as a parent. So you have no active role on that. You cannot rule the process. So it's not a direct transmission. So what is the explanation? The only plausible thing is somehow when you choose your partner, this partner has sometimes similarities to that of the person you are growing with. So your mother alienated the father, so you choose a wife which is similar to your mother. For me, that's at least partially logical. An illogical thing is in both cases you play a passive role. I wanted to know if there's something special about parental alienation, about the third group. So I said, okay, anything that has to do with conflict, I take it out and see if we have the same effect in health and life satisfaction between A, B, and C. You take the conflict away, the difference between A and B disappears completely, statistically, and most of the effect with the group C, but not completely. It might mean that there's something additional, not only the conflict. And for me, the most plausible explanation would be the family bond has been cut. And that's relevant. This gives security. Many things happen to you. Suddenly, you will have no more contact with father or mother. Suddenly, you may learn to reject that person. So not only you don't have any contact, but now you learn to reject that person, which is already inside you. Somehow you are learning to reject yourself. Maybe you may feel hatred for that person, so it's heading somehow to yourself. The more you get involved, the most harmful is the whole thing. Group A means there was no divorce. So the parents remained together until the majority of age. It doesn't mean there was no conflict. Some of them, the conflict was so high, but for cultural reasons they didn't separate. So the children suffer a lot. And the values of the children were similar to those of Group B. Group B, sometimes, it happened 2 times, the parents were so wise, there was a separation, but they did it so good that they always both acted together to protect their children. So for the children, made not really a difference. So there was no conflict involvement. They didn't know about anything. Both parents worked together at birthdays, at holidays. So for the children, didn't little by little, the more they could work with their minds, the more they really understood they are separated, but it was not harmful. So the values of these children are similar to those of average group A. So you can do that properly. That's the first lesson. You separate, do that properly. The perception of the system was extremely negative. So if you ask the people, young, old, man, woman, their opinion is negative or very negative in 80 to 93% of the cases. And I wanted to know why. The system is not prepared to deal with family conflicts because it's based on justice. But what is justice concerning the well-being of children? What is justice deciding between father and mother struggling for their children and visit whatever? What children need in this moment is protection from the conflict. No conflict escalation. I am appointed as this tutor of the visits, take care of a family court decision to be implemented. So you remain for a while in a family, 6 months, normally, sometimes 1 year, sometimes more. So after a while, you see really a family, much better than all the other colleagues, because they just judge, sees a situation, reads everything that was written, has 2 hours for the whole family, let's say 1 hour and a half for the procedure and half an hour to see the child. And after some months, I discover a completely different reality, sometimes opposite. Because you cannot really know in such a little amount of time. If parents are wise and want to manipulate you, they can do that because they know you will see them only 2 or 3 times. You may make many mistakes because you don't have time enough to know what's the best recipe for this family. Another problem is, I don't know, you have a problem with your husband and you decide to separate. Your problem is not custody. Your problem is not visit or alimony. Your emotional one, fears, mistrust, I don't know, vengeance, something emotional. But you have to translate this emotional problem at the core, which is the real problem, into categories that the judge can decide on. The real problem was, I want to separate because you cheated me, or because I met a man that makes me happy, and you don't. Look at there, learn how to do it. Or, why not being a bit brave and say, hey, family court, as we know it, is the wrong place to decide about family conflicts. That's really a conclusion of my study. We have to change many things. This study took me 2 years in total, and I knew the most difficult part is to have access to Group C. Where are they? It was not easy to find them. Once a parent decides to alienate, the family will never be the same. It will never be a normal contact with both parents. And then you have all constellations. Mother alienates, child decide, okay, and I want to see my father, or the contrary. Then she or he, because we have both in my study, say, okay, if you do that, forget about me. And he does it, and she turns and goes. So from that moment on, there's only the contact with the father or the mother that was missing for 15 years. And maybe, because there was suffering, this person dies very soon. Suddenly, the person has no father or mother. It's, let's say, a double alienation de facto. I really didn't know where to put one participant. I couldn't talk to him like I talk to you now. It was impossible. The damage in his mind was so deep he couldn't talk normally. The battle of both parents about him was so huge that he said an expression, they took my nest little by little away until it disappeared. So suddenly you are a child and have no nest anymore. They destroyed him. When I finished my study, I had the impression I feel so responsible about these destinies that are so sad and nobody or not many people knows about that. It's so terrible destinies that could be completely avoidable. People crying, big men crying when they talk about or women. That was, I would say, in every conversation in group C, B and C, somebody cried. It was really highly emotional. They are playing with their destinies without knowing them. In German, there's an expression that means Kindeswohlgefährdung. So it's like endangering the best interests of children. So whenever this happens, the state acts to protect the children. But that's most probably the only case this happens and nobody cares. So you can alienate a child, nobody cares. I really believe there's no evil in the world. We all have the wish to do good, to be consequent with ourselves, to love and be loved, which is human. Why, if we are all like this, produce or act in such a different way? And there are many explanations. One of them maybe lacks of information. We don't really know if you are deciding right or not, or what are the consequences of our acts. If we know it, we may act differently. I'm not saying don't get divorced. You have children. Decide first. Is your wish to get divorced so strong? Potentially you can have your children and you say, yes, it is. I want that, definitely. Like, okay, do that. But then protect your children as much as you can.